My 8-year-old grandson Tommy grabbed my wrist with ice-cold fingers and whispered urgently in my ear, "Grandma, look inside the closet before you sleep tonight." His voice trembled like autumn leaves in a storm. I felt my heart skip a beat as I stared into his wide, terrified eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, but he just shook his head and ran to his room. I had no idea then. But that box would change everything. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are. I need to know how far this warning travels. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We share new stories every day. And tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm Mary. And what happened in my daughter-in-law's house that night changed everything I thought I knew about my family. It was a cold December evening when my son Marcus called. His voice strained. "Mom, can you watch Tommy for the weekend? Sarah has a work conference, and I need to handle some urgent business." Something in his tone made me worry, but I agreed immediately. Tommy was my world, the bright light in my life since my husband passed 2 years ago. When I arrived at their suburban home, Sarah greeted me with her usual perfect smile. "Mary, thank you so much for coming," she said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes. There was something cold there I'd never noticed before. She was impeccably dressed as always, not a hair out of place, but something felt different. Tommy ran into my arms, but instead of his usual excited chatter, he seemed subdued. Sarah bent down and kissed his forehead. "Be good for Grandma, Mary, okay?" she whispered, but I caught the way her fingers pressed too firmly into his shoulders. Tommy flinched. After Marcus and Sarah left, I tried to make Tommy's favorite mac and cheese, but he barely touched it. He kept glancing toward the hallway leading to his parents' bedroom. "Grandma," he said quietly, "do you believe in monsters?" My heart clenched. "What kind of monsters, honey?" He looked around nervously, then whispered, "The kind that look like regular people." A chill ran down my spine, but I forced a smile. "Tommy, there are no monsters here. It's just you and me." That night, I tucked Tommy into his race car bed, reading him 3 stories until his eyelids grew heavy. As I was about to leave, his small hand caught mine. "Grandma," he whispered, barely audible, "look inside the closet before you sleep tonight. But don't let her know you looked her." My blood turned cold. Tommy's eyes darted toward the door, then back to me. "Promise me, Grandma, promise." I promised. After Tommy fell asleep, I sat in the living room trying to make sense of his words. Sarah had always been the perfect daughter-in-law, organized, successful, beautiful. She'd married Marcus 3 years ago, and Tommy had seemed to adjust well to having a stepmother. But now, looking back, I remembered small things. How Tommy had grown quieter over the past months. How he'd stopped mentioning Sarah in our phone calls. How he'd seemed almost afraid during family gatherings. Around 11 p.m., I decided to go to bed. The master bedroom felt unusually cold, and I noticed Sarah's perfume lingered heavily in the air, that expensive floral scent that always gave me headaches. I changed into my nightgown, brushed my teeth, and was about to climb into bed when Tommy's words echoed in my mind. "Look inside the closet before you sleep." My hands trembled as I approached the large walk-in closet. The door was slightly ajar, and something about that small gap filled me with dread. I pushed the door open slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sarah's clothes hung in perfect order, her shoes arranged by color and height. And then I saw it. Behind a row of tall boots sat a small cardboard box with a handwritten label, "Tommy Insurance." My breath caught. I reached out, feeling the unexpected heaviness, but before I could lift the lid, I heard a car door slam outside. But how did Tommy know? I flipped to the most recent entry, dated just 2 days ago. "The boy is smarter than I thought. Yesterday I caught him watching me prepare his afternoon snack. I think he saw me add the powder. I need to be more careful. If he tells anyone, everything will be ruined. Maybe it's time to increase the dosage." Terror shot through me like lightning. Tommy had been slowly dying, and somehow he'd figured it out. That's why he'd grown so quiet, so fearful. He'd been trying to protect himself the only way an 8-year-old knew how. By warning the one person who might believe him. I heard a car door slam outside. My heart nearly stopped. It was barely midnight. Sarah wasn't supposed to return until Sunday. I quickly put everything back in the box, placed it exactly where I'd found it, and closed the closet door. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely walk. The front door opened with a soft click. I dove into bed and pulled the covers up, trying to control my breathing. Footsteps moved quietly through the house. I heard Sarah check on Tommy, then head toward the master bedroom. The door creaked open. Through barely opened eyelids, I watched Sarah's silhouette in the doorway. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching me. Finally, she whispered, "Mary, are you awake?" I forced myself to breathe deeply, mimicking sleep. After another long moment, she closed the door. I heard her moving around the kitchen. When the sound of the shower finally filled the house, I slipped out of bed and hurried back to the closet. My hands shook as I opened the box. Inside were thick envelopes, life insurance policies. Dozens of them, all in Tommy's name, with Sarah listed as the trustee. My stomach twisted. Why would anyone take out this many policies on a healthy child? I wanted to dig deeper, but the water shut off abruptly, heart racing. I shoved everything back and closed the closet. I didn't have the full picture yet, but I knew one thing. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Heart racing. I shoved everything back and closed the closet. I didn't have the full picture yet, but I knew one thing. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. I crept to Tommy's room. He was awake, staring at the ceiling with eyes too old for his young face. "Grandma," he whispered when he saw me. "You looked, didn't you?" I nodded, fighting back tears. "Tommy, how long have you known?" "She's been making me sick for weeks," he said quietly. At first I thought it was just stomach bugs, but then I saw her putting white powder in my juice box. When I asked what it was, she said it was vitamin powder to help me grow strong. But I felt worse every day. My heart shattered. This brave little boy had been carrying this terrible secret, trying to protect himself with no one to turn to. I had to be sure. While Tommy rested, I returned to the closet one last time, determined to uncover the truth beneath the stack of insurance policies. Hidden under a folder of forged medical papers, I found a black leather journal. My blood ran cold as I flipped through the pages filled with Sarah's handwriting. Day 47. The doses are working. Tommy is getting weaker, and Mary hasn't noticed a thing. Each entry was colder than the last. She described the powders she mixed into his snacks. The way his symptoms appeared just enough like a rare childhood illness to avoid suspicion. She even measured his weight loss and pale complexion like a scientist recording an experiment. By the final page, there was no denying it. Sarah wasn't just cruel. She was methodically, deliberately killing my grandson. And if I hadn't listened to Tommy's whisper, I might never have known until it was too late. I closed the journal with trembling hands, my chest tight with rage and fear. Back in Tommy's room, I sat beside him and held his hand. "Why didn't you tell your daddy?" Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "I tried, but she's always there. And when I said I felt sick, she would comfort me and give me more medicine. Daddy thinks she's wonderful. He wouldn't believe me, but you believed I would." He nodded. "You always listen to me, Grandma." "Really listen." I hugged him tightly. "We're getting out of here right now." But as I stood up, the bedroom door opened. Sarah stood in the doorway, her hair wet from the shower, wearing a silk robe. But her face, the mask was completely gone. Her eyes were cold, calculating. "Terrifying." Well, she said softly, stepping into the room and closing the door. "Looks like our little Tommy has been sharing family secrets." Her eyes were cold, her smile sharp. "You think anyone will believe you, Mary? A scared old grandmother against the grieving stepmother?" She reached into her robe and pulled out a small device with a single red button. A faint hissing sound began somewhere in the house. "You hear that? By morning they'll call it a tragic accident, a gas leak. You and Tommy, gone." She tilted her head, almost amused. "Marcus will be devastated. I'll be there to comfort him. I'll inherit everything." Her finger hovered over the button, the smile widening. "No one will ever know the truth, except you, and you won't live long enough to tell it. You're insane." I whispered. "I'm practical," she said, flat and calm. "And I'm going to finish what I started." Her finger pressed the button on the device, and somewhere in the house, I heard a faint hissing sound. Gas. She was actually doing it. Tommy tugged on my nightgown. "Grandma," he whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. "The window, of course." The window opened onto the backyard. While Sarah's back was turned, I moved. "Where do you think you're going?" She snapped. "Nowhere." I lied. "Just sit." My hand hit the latch. Tommy pushed at my back. I shoved him through the window. "Run." I screamed. He hit the grass. I followed. We rolled. Sarah slammed the frame, clawing to get out. "Help." I yelled toward the Miller house. Lights flicked on. A dog barked. Jim Miller opened his door. "Call 911. I gasped. "Gas leak. She's trying to kill us." Jim pulled us inside. Blankets. A phone dialed. Sirens cut through the night. The next few hours were a blur of police officers, paramedics, and fire trucks. They found the gas leak Sarah had created using a remote valve in the basement, a sophisticated setup she'd clearly planned in advance. They also found the box in the closet with all the evidence of her plot to murder Tommy. Sarah tried to claim she'd returned home early and discovered the gas leak herself. But the remote device in her pocket and the evidence in the closet told a different story. When they tested Tommy's blood, they found traces of the rat poison she'd been giving him for months. Marcus was devastated when he learned the truth. The woman he'd trusted with his son's life had been slowly killing the boy he loved more than anything. But he was also grateful that Tommy had been smart enough to recognize the danger and brave enough to trust me with the truth during the investigation. We learned that Sarah had done this before. Her first husband had died under mysterious circumstances, leaving her a substantial life insurance payout. She'd been careful, patient, methodical. Tommy would have been her second victim if not for his courage and instinct for survival, but the real terror began during the investigation. As detectives dug deeper into Sarah's past, they uncovered a web of deception that stretched back years. Her real name wasn't Sarah Mitchell, it was Sandra Moore, and she had a criminal history spanning 3 states. The first victim was her college boyfriend, David Chen. He died of food poisoning after a romantic dinner she'd prepared. No one suspected foul play at the time. The symptoms matched a severe allergic reaction, even though David had no known allergies. Then came Robert Harrison, her first husband. He died suddenly of what doctors called a rare heart condition. The life insurance payout was substantial, enough for Sandra to completely reinvent herself as Sarah Mitchell. She moved across the country, changed her appearance, created a new identity. She's what we call a Black Widow killer, Detective Martinez explained to us during one of many interviews. She targets men with children or substantial assets, wins their trust, then systematically eliminates anyone who stands between her and the money. The most chilling discovery came when they searched Sarah's apartment, the one Marcus didn't even know she kept as a backup residence. Inside a fireproof safe, they found detailed files on potential targets, men she'd researched online, their financial information, their family situations. Marcus's file was 3 inches thick, including surveillance photos of our family gatherings, Tommy's school schedule, even my daily routine. She'd been planning this for over a year before she even met your son, Detective Martinez told us. She knew everything about your family before she engineered that first meeting at the coffee shop. The coffee shop meeting hadn't been accidental at all. Sarah had studied Marcus's habits, learned his routine, and positioned herself to bump into him at exactly the right moment. She'd even researched his favorite books so she could accidentally be reading the same novel when they met. Tommy's poisoning had been meticulously planned too. The rat poison she'd used was a special industrial-grade compound that breaks down quickly in the bloodstream, making it nearly impossible to detect unless you know exactly what to look for. She'd been giving him tiny amounts over months, gradually increasing the dosage as his body built up tolerance. Most serial poisoners make the mistake of rushing, the prosecutor explained during the pretrial hearings. Sarah was patient. She was willing to take 8 to 10 months to kill Tommy, making it look like a natural illness that developed slowly over time. The fake medical reports were masterfully created. She'd hacked into legitimate medical databases, stolen doctor identities, and created an entire fictional medical history for Tommy. If her plan had worked, the autopsy would have confirmed the rare genetic condition she'd invented. But what haunted me most was learning about her other potential victims. After Marcus, she'd planned to target Jim Miller, our neighbor. His wife had passed away recently, leaving him alone with his teenage daughter and a substantial retirement fund. Sarah had already begun the groundwork. She'd volunteered at the same charity where Jim donated, attended his wife's funeral to pay respects, and had started showing up at places he frequented. During the trial, more victims came forward. A woman in Ohio whose brother had died mysteriously after dating Sarah for 6 months. A family in Nevada whose father had died of sudden illness, leaving behind a stepfamily that included Sarah as his new wife. In each case, the deaths had seemed natural, unfortunate, but not suspicious. The prosecution built their case methodically, showing the jury Sarah's pattern of behavior across multiple states and identities. They brought in handwriting experts who proved the fake medical documents were written by Sarah. They presented the surveillance photos she'd taken of our family. They showed the detailed financial analysis she'd done of Marcus's assets, but the most damning evidence was her own words. Hidden in that apartment, investigators found hours of audio recordings, Sarah talking to herself, planning each step of Tommy's murder. She'd recorded herself like a twisted diary, documenting her progress and celebrating each time Tommy got sicker. Day 63. Her voice played in the courtroom, cold and calculating. The boy vomited twice today after his snack. His color is getting pale and he's losing weight. Marcus is starting to worry, which is perfect. I'll suggest seeing a specialist next week, one of my fake doctors, of course. By Christmas, this will all be over. The recordings went on for months. In one particularly chilling entry, she described watching Tommy struggle to eat his cereal, knowing it was laced with poison. "He's such a brave little fighter," she'd recorded herself saying. "Too bad bravery won't save him from what's coming." Marcus broke down completely when they played that recording. He'd been sitting in the gallery, supporting the prosecution, but hearing Sarah describe poisoning his son while pretending to care for him was too much. The bailiff had to escort him from the courtroom. Tommy, thankfully, was too young to attend most of the trial. We'd explained to him in simple terms that Sarah was sick in her mind and that she'd tried to hurt him, but the full extent of her evil was something we shielded him from. He'd been through enough trauma. The defense tried to argue that Sarah suffered from multiple personality disorder, that she wasn't responsible for her actions. They brought in psychiatrists who testified about her troubled childhood, her history of abuse, her mental instability. But the prosecution countered with evidence of her careful planning, her methodical approach, her ability to maintain relationships and hold jobs while carrying out her crimes. This wasn't the impulsive act of someone suffering from mental illness, the prosecutor argued in closing statements. This was the calculated behavior of a predator who used mental health as a convenient excuse for her actions. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts, including attempted murder, fraud, and identity theft, Sarah showed no emotion. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead as if she were listening to a weather report. The victim impact statements were heartbreaking. Tommy, with Marcus's help, had written a letter that Marcus read aloud. "Dear Judge, the lady who tried to hurt me made me scared to eat food and scared to trust people. But Grandma Mary saved me, and now I know there are more good people than bad people. I hope the lady gets help so she doesn't hurt other kids." Even the judge wiped away tears when Marcus finished reading. At sentencing, Sarah finally spoke. Instead of showing remorse, she used her final statement to justify her actions. "These men were weak," she said, her voice eerily calm. "They needed someone strong to guide them, to help them make difficult decisions. I was trying to save them from the burden of caring for children who would only hold them back." The courtroom erupted. Family members of her other victims shouted in outrage. The judge had to call for order multiple times. Sarah sat through it all with that same empty expression, as if she genuinely believed she'd been doing her victims a favor. "In 30 years on this bench," Judge Richardson said during sentencing, "I have never encountered such cold-blooded evil disguised as love. You are a danger to society, particularly to children and vulnerable families. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years for the fraud and identity theft charges." Sarah was led away in shackles, still showing no emotion, no remorse, no recognition of the lives she'd destroyed. "I thought it was finally over, but 3 months later, Detective Martinez knocked on my door with a revelation even darker than Sarah's trial. Sarah hadn't been acting alone. Detective Martinez laid out the evidence like a scalpel. Inside Sarah's apartment, agents found meticulously forged medical reports, audio logs in which she documented her actions, and financial records showing suspicious transfers and multiple life policies taken out under different names. They located a remote-controlled valve in the basement linked to accounts and devices she controlled, and traced falsified prescriptions and hacked doctor identities used to create a false medical history for Tommy. The pattern of careful planning and cross-state activity made clear this was not one woman's isolated crime, but part of an organized operation. The aftermath was almost as difficult as the crime itself. Marcus struggled with guilt and depression, blaming himself for bringing Sarah into their lives. He'd been so grateful to find someone who seemed to love Tommy, so desperate to give his son a complete family, that he'd ignored the warning signs. Tommy needed months of therapy to overcome the trauma. He developed eating disorders from being afraid that any food might be poisoned. He had nightmares about Sarah coming back. Sometimes he would wake up screaming, convinced that she was in his room, forcing him to eat poisoned snacks. But children are resilient in ways that never cease to amaze me. With love, patience, and professional help, Tommy slowly healed. The first time I saw him laugh at one of his terrible knock-knock jokes, really laugh, not the forced smile he'd been giving us for months, I knew we'd gotten our boy back. The investigation also led to other arrests. Sarah had been part of a larger network of identity thieves and insurance fraudsters. Her fake medical documents had been created by a doctor who'd lost his license years ago, but continued practicing under stolen identities. Her financial research had been aided by someone working inside a major credit reporting agency. Detective Martinez told us that our case broke open a conspiracy that had been operating for over a decade, victimizing hundreds of families across multiple states. Tommy's courage didn't just save his own life, she said. It probably saved dozens of other potential victims. Today, 5 years later, Tommy is 13 and thriving. He plays soccer, excels in school, and has a wonderful relationship with his father. Marcus eventually began dating again, carefully, slowly, with full background checks and Tommy's approval every step of the way. He met Jennifer at a parent-teacher conference, and she's everything Sarah pretended to be: genuine, kind, and completely devoted to both Marcus and Tommy. As for me, I've become something of an advocate for child protection. I speak at schools and community centers about recognizing the signs of abuse, about listening to children when they try to tell us something's wrong. Tommy often comes with me to these talks, sharing his story in his own words, encouraging other kids to speak up if they feel unsafe. The most important lesson we learned is that evil doesn't always look like evil. It often looks like kindness, like love, like everything we want and need in our lives. Sarah was beautiful, successful, charming, and completely devoted to destroying our family from within. She nearly succeeded because we trusted our desire for happiness more than our instincts for danger. But we also learned that children possess a wisdom that adults often lose. Tommy recognized Sarah's true nature before any of us did, not through sophisticated analysis but through pure instinct. Children know when someone's affection feels wrong, when kindness comes with hidden costs, when love is being used as a weapon. The night Sarah tried to kill us with gas remains the most terrifying experience of my life. But it was also the night that proved the power of family bonds, the importance of listening to our children, and the strength that comes from facing evil together. If I could go back and change anything, it wouldn't be meeting Sarah or even the months of fear and trauma that followed. Those experiences, horrible as they were, taught us who we really are and how much we mean to each other. What I would change is how long it took us to really hear what Tommy was trying to tell us. Children's voices matter. Their fears are valid. Their instincts are sharp. When a child tells you something feels wrong, believe them. When they whisper warnings in the dark, listen. When they try to protect themselves in the only ways they know how, support them. Tommy saved our entire family that night. But only because I finally listened to what he'd been trying to tell me for months. His whispered warning, "Look inside the closet before you sleep," revealed the evidence that exposed Sarah's true nature and saved our lives. Every family should remember Tommy's courage and know that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Sometimes a child's whispered warning is the only thing standing between a family and unimaginable tragedy, and sometimes looking in the closet before you sleep can save your life. But there's more to this story that I haven't told you yet, details that still give me chills when I think about them, and revelations that came to light months after Sarah's conviction, 3 months after the trial ended. Detective Martinez called me with news that turned my blood cold all over again. "Mary, we need to talk. We've discovered something about Sarah that changes everything we thought we knew about her timeline." When she arrived at my house, her face was grave. She spread out a series of photographs and documents on my kitchen table, the same table where I'd served Sarah dinner so many times. Never knowing I was feeding a monster, we found Sarah's real journals, Detective Martinez explained. Not the fake one she kept for show, but her actual planning documents. "Mary, she'd been watching your family for over 3 years before she even approached Marcus." The photographs were surveillance shots of Tommy at his elementary school, playing in our backyard, walking with me to the grocery store. Some were taken when he was only 5 years old. Long before Sarah had ever met Marcus, she targeted Tommy specifically, the detective continued. Not Marcus, not the insurance money, well, not initially. She was obsessed with Tommy. My hands shook as I looked at the images. There was my innocent grandson, completely unaware that a predator was stalking him, planning his death years in advance. But why Tommy? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Detective Martinez hesitated. Sarah had what psychologists call a pathological obsession with perfect families. She believed that children like Tommy, happy, loved, secure, were somehow taking away resources that should go to children who had suffered like she had. In her twisted mind, Tommy represented everything she'd never had, and she wanted to destroy that. The journals revealed a level of obsession that went far beyond what we'd discovered during the trial. Sarah had researched Tommy's favorite foods, his school schedule, his friends' names, even his favorite bedtime stories. She'd attended school events where she didn't belong, hiding in crowds of parents, watching him perform in Christmas plays and field day activities. She was building a psychological profile, Detective Martinez explained, learning everything about Tommy so she could get close to him through Marcus. But the truly disturbing part is what she wrote about you, Mary. She handed me another journal entry, this one focused entirely on me. The grandmother is the key to everything. The boy trusts her completely, more than he trusts his own father. If I can win over Mary Williams, I can have unlimited access to Tommy. She's lonely since her husband died, desperate to see her son happy again. I need to become the daughter-in-law she never had but always wanted. Reading Sarah's analysis of my grief, my loneliness, my hopes for Marcus's happiness, it was like being violated all over again. She'd studied me like a specimen, identified my emotional vulnerabilities, and exploited them with surgical precision, but the most chilling discovery came in Sarah's detailed timeline. She hadn't just planned Tommy's murder, she'd planned mine too. Phase 3, Detective Martinez read aloud, eliminate the grandmother. Mary Williams is too observant, too protective. Once Tommy is gone, she'll become suspicious of every illness, every accident. She'll never stop investigating. The grief from losing Tommy will make her vulnerable to manipulation. But she's still too dangerous to leave alive. Sarah had planned to wait exactly 6 months after Tommy's death, then target me with a different method. The plan was to befriend me in my grief, become my support system, then gradually isolate me from other family members. Eventually, she would have arranged for me to have a fall down my basement stairs, making it look like an accident brought on by my devastation over losing Tommy. She actually scouted your house, Detective Martinez continued, showing me photos Sarah had taken of my basement stairs, my back porch, even the inside of my medicine cabinet. She broke in at least 12 times over 2 years, always when you were out, always careful not to disturb anything. She was planning every detail of your murder while you were welcoming her into your family. The violation felt complete. Every dinner I'd cooked for her, every conversation we'd had, every moment I'd tried to make her feel like family, she'd been using it all to plan my death. But there was more. The investigation had uncovered a network of women like Sarah, all targeting families with children and substantial assets. They called themselves the Collective and communicated through encrypted channels, sharing techniques for poisoning, methods for creating false identities, and strategies for avoiding detection. Sarah wasn't just a serial killer, Detective Martinez explained. She was part of an organized group that's been operating for over 15 years. They've been responsible for at least 47 deaths across North America, all made to look like natural causes or accidents. The scope was staggering. Families destroyed, children murdered, innocent people dead, all for insurance money and assets. The women in the collective treated it like a business, complete with training materials, best practices, and territory agreements. The good news is that breaking Sarah's case gave us the evidence we needed to arrest the entire network, Detective Martinez said. 17 women in 8 states have been charged. It's the largest domestic terrorism case involving serial killers that the FBI has ever prosecuted. Over the following months, more details emerged during the trials of Sarah's accomplices. We learned that Tommy hadn't been randomly selected. He'd been chosen because the collective had identified Marcus as an ideal target through financial databases they'd illegally accessed. Sarah had volunteered to take the assignment because she'd become obsessed with destroying what she called perfect family units, the training materials the collective used were like something out of a horror movie. Step-by-step guides for seducing single parents, detailed instructions for poisoning children, templates for creating false medical records, even scripts for how to act during police questioning. But perhaps the most disturbing revelation was how close they'd come to succeeding with other families. The FBI identified 8 other children who were in various stages of being poisoned by collective members when the arrests were made. All of those children survived, but some required months of medical treatment to recover from the toxins in their systems. Tommy's case became the centerpiece of the federal prosecution because it was the most thoroughly documented. Sarah's obsessive record-keeping, which she'd intended to use to perfect her methods, instead provided investigators with a complete playbook of the collective's operations. During the federal trials, we learned that Sarah had been one of the collective's most successful operatives. Over 8 years, she'd killed 11 people across 5 states, men, women, and children, all while maintaining the perfect facade of a loving partner or caring stepmother. The psychological evaluations revealed that Sarah suffered from what experts called acquired sociopathy, a complete lack of empathy that had developed during her own traumatic childhood. But unlike other trauma survivors who seek healing, Sarah had chosen to weaponize her pain, using it to justify destroying innocent families. She could have gotten help. The lead FBI psychologist testified. She could have chosen therapy, medication, positive coping strategies. Instead, she chose to spread her trauma by inflicting it on others. She became the monster she claimed to be running from. The trials took 2 years to complete. Tommy, now 11, had to testify twice, once during Sarah's state trial and once during the federal prosecution of the collective. Both times he showed incredible courage, clearly explaining how Sarah had made him feel unsafe and how he'd known to warn me about the closet. She used to watch me when she thought I wasn't looking, Tommy told the federal court. Her face would change when she thought nobody could see her. It was like she was wearing a mask that slipped sometimes. That's when I knew she wasn't really nice. The judge commended Tommy for his bravery and clarity. This young man's instincts and courage didn't just save his own life and his grandmother's life, she said. His willingness to speak the truth helped bring down an entire network of killers. He's a true hero. By the time all the trials ended, the collective's remaining members had been sentenced to a combined total of over 800 years in prison. Sarah received the harshest sentence, life without parole plus 150 years, ensuring she would never see freedom again. But the legal victories couldn't erase the psychological scars. Tommy struggled with anxiety for years after the trials ended. He'd have panic attacks when meeting new people, especially women who reminded him of Sarah. He developed severe trust issues and would sometimes test new people in his life. Looking for signs of deception or hidden agendas, Marcus blamed himself for all of it. He'd lie awake at night replaying every interaction he'd had with Sarah, looking for clues he should have caught, warning signs he should have recognized. The guilt nearly destroyed him, and he spent months in therapy learning to forgive himself for being deceived by a master manipulator. As for me, I had to face the reality that I'd been completely fooled by someone who'd been planning to murder both my grandson and me. The woman I'd tried to welcome as a daughter had been studying my weaknesses, planning my death, all while sitting at my dinner table and accepting my love. The trauma bonded our family in ways that both strengthened and complicated our relationships. Tommy became incredibly protective of both Marcus and me, constantly worried that another predator might target us. Marcus became almost overprotective of Tommy, struggling to balance safety with allowing his son to live a normal life. We all had to learn new ways of trusting people. Background checks became routine for anyone who wanted to get close to our family. We installed security systems, changed our routines frequently, and always maintained what Detective Martinez called protective awareness, but slowly. With professional help and the support of other families who'd survived similar ordeals, we began to heal. Tommy started playing soccer again and made new friends. Marcus began dating Jennifer, but only after she'd voluntarily submitted to extensive background checks and psychological evaluations. I returned to my volunteer work at the church, though I was much more cautious about getting close to new people. The most significant change was in how we communicated with each other. Tommy's whispered warning had saved our lives, but only because I'd finally listened to what he'd been trying to tell me for months. We established new family rules about sharing concerns, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. If something feels wrong, we talk about it immediately. Became our family motto. No secrets, no dismissed concerns, no polite silence when our instincts tell us there's danger. 8 years after Sarah's arrest, Tommy is now 16 and thriving. He's an honor student, plays varsity soccer, and volunteers with an organization that helps other child victims of crime. He still has moments of anxiety, but he's learned to trust his instincts while not letting fear control his life. Marcus and Jennifer married 3 years ago in a small, private ceremony with extensive security. A far cry from the large wedding he'd planned with Sarah, Jennifer has become a wonderful stepmother to Tommy and a loving daughter-in-law to me. But more importantly, she's proven herself trustworthy through years of patience and consistency. The most remarkable change has been in Tommy's relationship with trust. Rather than making him paranoid or fearful, surviving Sarah's manipulation has given him an almost supernatural ability to read people's true intentions. He can spot manipulation, deception, and false kindness from a mile away. It's like having a superpower, he told me recently. I can tell when people are being real or when they're putting on an act. Sarah taught me that without meaning to. This ability has made him incredibly valuable to law enforcement. The FBI has consulted with Tommy on several cases involving predators who target families. His insights into the psychology of deception have helped identify other potential threats and protect other children. Detective Martinez who's become something of a family friend over the years, says Tommy has helped solve 6 additional cases involving family predators. He can see through facades that fool experienced investigators, she told us. His survival instincts are off the charts, but Tommy uses his abilities for good beyond law enforcement. He speaks at schools and community centers, teaching other children how to recognize when adults make them feel uncomfortable or unsafe. His message is always the same: trust your feelings. If someone makes you feel scared or confused, tell a grown-up you trust. Keep telling until someone listens. The ripple effects of Tommy's courage continue to spread. The story of how his whispered warning saved our family has been featured in documentaries, training materials for social workers, and educational programs for parents. We've received thousands of letters from families who say our story helped them recognize danger in their own lives. One letter particularly moved me. A mother in Texas wrote, "My daughter kept saying her stepfather made her feel icky but couldn't explain why. After hearing Tommy's story, I decided to investigate instead of dismissing her concerns. We discovered he'd been secretly photographing her and other children. He's now in prison and my daughter is safe." Tommy's courage literally saved my child. Stories like that remind us that our trauma wasn't meaningless. The horror we survived has become a beacon of hope for other families. A reminder that children's voices matter and that evil can be defeated when good people stand together. Sarah remains in prison, where she'll spend the rest of her life. She's never expressed remorse for her crimes or acknowledged the pain she caused. In her mind, she was always the victim, always justified in her actions. The last time we heard anything about her, she was attempting to write a book from prison, still trying to manipulate people into sympathy for her difficult childhood. But her voice no longer matters. What matters is Tommy's voice, whispering warnings in the dark. What matters is the courage of children who trust their instincts and the wisdom of adults who listen. What matters is the truth that love is stronger than evil, and that families who support each other can survive anything. That closet, where Sarah hid her instruments of murder, is now empty. The house has been sold, the evidence destroyed, the nightmare officially over. But the lessons remain. Listen to children, trust your instincts, and never ignore a whispered warning in the dark. Sometimes looking in the closet before you sleep can save your life. But more importantly, sometimes a child's courage in the face of unimaginable evil can save entire families and protect countless other innocent victims. Tommy's whispered words, "Grandma, look inside the closet before you sleep," will echo in my heart forever. They remind me that heroes come in all sizes, that wisdom often speaks in whispers, and that the smallest voices sometimes carry the most important messages. Listen to the children in your life. Believe them when they tell you something feels wrong. Act on their warnings, no matter how unlikely they seem. Their lives and yours may depend on it. That's the complete story of how my grandson's courage saved our family and helped bring down a network of killers. May it serve as a reminder that evil exists but can be defeated, that children deserve our protection and belief, and that whispered warnings in the dark should never be ignored. The names and some details have been changed to protect our family's privacy. But every word of this nightmare, and our triumph over it, is true. Share this story so that other families might recognize the signs of danger before it's too late. And remember, when a child whispers a warning, listen. Really listen. Their courage might just save everyone you love. That night changed everything. I learned that monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they smile across the dinner table. But I also learned something even more powerful. A child's whispered warning can save lives. If only we are willing to listen. Tommy's courage didn't just protect us, it reminded me that even the smallest voices deserve to be heard. And believe. What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters and could help someone else. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the truth hiding in plain sight.